I wanted just to get
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear.
Thank you. It's 6:30. Do we want to start or do we want to wait a minute? Okay, it's 6:30. I'm going to go on and get started. I want to first of all welcome everyone to our second town hall for our remote process. I'm Dr. Joylyn Pruitt Adams. I'm the superintendent for Oak Park and River Forest High School District. I want to take just a second to introduce our facilitators for the night. I'd like to introduce Ms. Frances Kraft and Ms. Sherry Johnson from the E-Team. Also, I'd like to introduce Dr. Lincoln Chandler. The district has had a long-standing relationship with Dr. Chandler, who specializes in program evaluation and data use, and has been very involved in our Culture, Climate, and Behavior Committee. And then our moderator for tonight will be Ms. Karen Sullivan, Executive Director of Communications and Community Outreach. Lincoln, did you want to say something?
Just to thank you all for your attendance and appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this forum this evening.
Thank you. So we're going to go on and get ready with our presentation. For the past few months, just a slide up.
There we go.
There we go. For the past few months, superintendents around the state have been asking for specific, consistent metrics to help guide decision-making around whether or not to open schools for on-site instruction. In late August, the state of Illinois and the Illinois Department of Public Health finally issued this information in a document called Adaptive Pause and Metrics, Interim School Guidance for Local Health Departments. This guidance is aimed specifically at health departments to help them support school officials in making data-based decisions. Next slide.
So if you'd like to see the entire 11-page adaptive pause document, I created a bit.ly address for it to make it easy. You can go to this address here. And this presentation that we're giving tonight is based on the guidance in that document. Next slide, please. So before we dig into specifics, I want to explain a couple of terms. First, adaptive pause. As the state defines it, an adaptive pause is a strategy that allows for movement into any level of remote learning to prevent disease transmission during a pandemic. The overall goal of implementing adaptive pauses is to reduce the frequency of these interruptions and allow for in-person learning whenever feasible. Next slide. So the next term to understand is community transmission. That exists when a case is identified without a clear source of infection in the community. The infected person did not travel outside the community during the incubation period, and they don't know how they were infected. There are three different levels or ratings for community transmission: minimal, moderate, and substantial. At all levels of community transmission, school officials may need an adaptive pause to consult with their local health department and plan how to respond to a given scenario. Next slide. So now let's take a look at the metrics that IDPH says schools need to be assessing. As I said earlier, the Illinois Department of Public Health is tracking a variety of risk metrics for all counties across the state. They update the metrics weekly and post them on their website. What I have on the slide here is what they just posted this morning. They published a weekly map with each county coded either blue or orange. Blue indicates that the county is experiencing overall stable COVID-19 metrics. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the numbers are good, just that they are stable. Orange indicates there are warning signs of increased COVID-19 risk for the county. So for week 39, and that's the most recent week that they have available, Cook County was blue, meaning that the metrics are stable. So for another example, in week 36, the metric for new cases per 100,000 was substantial, and the county was still blue. So although, like I said, all the numbers aren't always great, blue is an indication that they're stable. Next slide. So the IDPH dashboard for schools looks specifically at 4 key metrics to determine community spread and what schools should be paying attention to and making their decisions. So here's the most recent data for Cook County, which is for the week of Sunday, September 20th through Saturday, September 26th. Test positivity refers to the number of positive tests compared to the total number of tests being done. In general, a low positivity rate is a good sign. Because not everyone who has COVID-19 gets tested, rising case numbers could mean that the disease is spreading, or it could mean that testing efforts are identifying a larger share of the sick people in society. New cases is a measure of the new confirmed COVID-19 cases per day. It's calculated as a proportion of the population, specifically new daily cases for every 100,000 people. Using cases per 100,000 depicts risk more accurately, since this takes into account the overall number of cases. The case rates do not account for new infections that are not caught by testing. The dashboard also includes the level of community transmission that aligns to each metric. We've been asked why we're using county level data instead of just local data. First, this is the recommendation of the State Department of Public Health, and it's important that we pay attention to that. And second, Oak Park and River Forest are not an island. Our teachers and staff live in other communities. They have partners who work in other communities. Their children go to school throughout the city and the suburbs. So we need to be looking at the overall picture for our area, not just the very specific local numbers. Next slide. So to easily track the metrics on an ongoing basis, we've created a color-coded spreadsheet, and it's posted on our website so that the community can monitor the status of the school-related metrics, which you can do on IDPH's site, but they don't include the historic data for 2 of the metrics. So you can see what it's been like in previous weeks on our spreadsheet. And if you go to our homepage, the address is right there. If you look under quick links, which is on the lower right-hand side of the page, you'll see weekly COVID-19 metrics. That's the spreadsheet to be looking for. We update the sheet each Monday after I check the IDPH site. And as the steering committee continues to meet throughout the semester, these metrics will help drive decisions for the second semester. Next slide, and I will hand it back to Dr. Pruitt-Adams.
Thank you. The other key metrics we look at are local case counts, particularly for age groups 14 through 19. The number of teachers and staff who are able to work on site, and the number of students who will opt into on site. So in determining whether we can return to in-person instruction next semester, these are the key metrics that we will look at specifically. Since July 1, we've seen a 167% increase in cases among teenagers in Oak Park. It is the second largest number of cases in Oak Park, the largest percentage of growth in cases for any age group. This does not include River Forest, which is under the jurisdiction of the Cook County Health Department. This is the kind of data that influences our decision making at the lower level. The overall metrics for Cook County may be good, but an outbreak among our students can create a need for what's called an adaptive pause. Other key data points are the numbers of teachers available to work on site and the number of students who opt into on-site. And if you, as referenced earlier, you can go to our previous presentation and see those numbers. Next slide, please. In our initial plan, we had a path for reopening, which was included our remote learning plan. And you can find that on appendix page 33 of the plan. Our remote learning plan that was approved in August, we had this outline with those guiding principles. Next slide. So our 4 stages for reopening. Stage 1 was full remote, which started August 19th. All classes are fully remote. Social emotional support is provided, as well as clubs and extracurriculars, but they are all remote. Oak Park Stage 2, remote with gradual return of identified students, and that started in September and October. All classes are still fully remote. Some are in person, with supports available for identified students, such as those with individual IEPs, Section 504 accommodations, and etc. Stage 3 would be the hybrid, and that date is to be determined. Staff and students gradually return to the building for some level of in-person instruction, dependent upon the state and local public health guidance based on flattening of positivity rates and the 7 and 14-day rolling average. In stage 4, full in-person in phase 5 of Restore Illinois with all students and staff fully on site instruction activities as they were pre-pandemic conditions. Per Governor Pritzker's restore, as I said earlier, stage 5 would take us back to where we would be prior to the pandemic, and that's with either a vaccine or effective treatment available. Again, I want to stress that it is our goal to get OPRF at stage 3 as soon as we feel it's safe to do so that we can offer a hybrid plan where every student will have the chance for at least some level of in-person instruction if they opt in to do so. The next slide, please. So our current status is stage 2, remote with gradual return of identified students. Since the beginning of the school year, driver's ed behind the wheel instruction has been on site. On September 28th, we brought on site our auto technology and woodshop. Today, October 5th, our learning labs for diverse learners and instructional programs, and starting on the 13th, other students with identified needs. Again, we are hopeful that sometime in second semester, we will be able to move to OPRF stage 3 with some level of on-site classes available for students to opt in. Developing this plan is the primary work of our steering committee during the next few weeks. Next slide. I'm going to turn this back over now to Ms. Karen Sullivan, who's moderating tonight's event.
Thank you, Dr. Pruitt-Adams. So I just want to give you a quick overview of how things are going to work tonight. The E-team selected the questions to be asked. Questions were submitted last week. I'm sure many of you watching submitted questions. They went through the questions and selected which ones to ask, and Dr. Chandler will explain that process in a moment. The faces you see here are the steering committee, and let's say the first time you answer a question, I'll introduce the member of the steering committee who's speaking. You have an opportunity to send in follow-up questions as we're going through the evening. You can go to the address you see there on the presentation slide, bit.ly/OPRF Live, to submit questions. If something arises that you don't understand or a question that you hadn't thought of last week, feel free to send those in. And the last 15 minutes of our presentation, 7:45 to 8 o'clock, we're going to be answering those questions. And then can I have the next slide? Dr. Chandler, if you wanted to explain how the process worked.
Sure. Thanks, Karen. As Karen was saying, a survey was released to the community, and through that survey, we received somewhere on the order of about 200 different questions and responses. And similarly to the first round of surveys that went out in August, there were sort of 5 key themes that developed, and we used that as a rough way of just kind of keeping track of the different questions. Those topics, first of all, being the bucket, just getting more information out and clarifying what are the protocols, policies, and procedures as in this current state, and then also as the district contemplates moving to a hybrid model. And then the second bucket is impact on specific groups. So there were questions about seniors or questions about folks with IEPs or in specific programs. The third bucket really focuses in on stakeholder expectations and accountability. So that's accountability for teachers and students and staff in this time. The fourth big bucket, evidence and rationale, that's, what data do we have? Where is it coming from? How do we know? And what are we looking for? And then the fifth big bucket is supports. What type of supports can the district make available to the teachers, to the students, to the families throughout this time? And just to say the rationale or how we got to being able to narrow down the questions, as I said, there's 200 questions and we can't cover them all now, but there were a few criteria that we looked at. We looked at the frequency of the questions. So the things that we picked were topics that were expressed by a number of folks, but then we also wanted to try to represent the range of different questions. Given the campus, there are a lot of very different opinions and a lot of different questions. And so we tried to do what we could to provide a balanced mix of comments and questions to be reviewed tonight. And that's all I have. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Chandler. If I could have the next slide just for a moment. So we're going to take this down in just a second. So if you think you might have a question, please write down this URL or navigate to it now, bit.ly/OPRF live. And I think now we are ready to start taking your questions. Sherry, I believe you're the one posing the questions, right?
Yes.
Try. There's so many. Oh, there you are. There's so many faces here. All right, let's hit it off with the first question.
So the first set of questions is to get to the feeling that that parents are showing frustration with there not being a plan in place yet. And so I'm going to talk about those questions, and then they asked, there were 3 different questions. They asked very similar questions. And so I'm going to combine all the questions, but I'm just going to give you the feeling of what those questions are initially. The first one being that there's a feeling that the OPRF administration is dragging their feet and not really pushing forward in a plan. And there's a lot of concern about that. The community wants to know why that is. Is there already a sentiment that we're not going to go back? And is that why? Do you understand the frustration parents are feeling? And that the feeling is that we've already met the metrics to return. And why hasn't OPRF set this in place? And the feeling that November, if we were to switch in November, that's too late to switch over. And again, why isn't there a plan already to go back? So there's a list of questions. I'm gonna ask them individually, one at a time, and let you answer one at a time. So why doesn't OPRF have a plan for returning to in-person learning?
I'm going to direct that one to Dr. Pruitt-Adams, our superintendent.
I want to start off by saying we do understand the frustration. I want to start off that way. We are working aggressively towards the creation of what I phrase as a rolling hybrid. One of the things we noted back as far as August 5th was that our current remote plan was for first semester, and that as we could bring specifically identified students on campus, we would. The rationale behind that was ensuring that as an institution, we could make sure to the best of our ability that all of our students and staff would be safe once they return to campus. As I said, we are working aggressively on a rolling hybrid plan. We have a timeline, and the steering committee is meeting weekly to ensure that that timeline is met, so that by second semester, we have some type of hybrid on campus.
Okay, will OPRF return to in-person learning this school year?
That is our hope. As I indicated, right now, we have some in-person classes. We've got behind the wheel driver's ed, wood shop, auto shop. Today, we started 2 learning labs for our most diverse learners. Next week, we'll bring in approximately 40+ students who have specific identified needs for support that will be offered. Our hybrid, as you know, so we say we're in OPRF stage 2.5 because we know we're not at stage 3 yet. But we are working aggressively, as I said, towards a hybrid for second semester. And our goal is to have every single student at some point in time experience in-person instruction on campus.
If they want to.
Right, if they opt into, that is correct.
When will the plan be available?
We're currently working on the plan. Our first target date to take a draft to the Board of Education is at the November 19th Board of Education meeting, get some feedback from the board, as well as the advisory committee we're establishing. The latest date to take the final plan to the board is the December 3rd Board of Education meeting, with everything in place so that communication can go out. And when I say everything, that's including student schedules and all.
Have we already met the requirements for OPRF's return to in-person learning?
When you, could you specify requirements? Are you talking metrics or just everything we're looking at?
Yeah, I believe it's the metrics. There was some feeling that there were metrics defined and we've already met those metrics.
There are metrics defined by the Illinois Department of Public Health, the CDC, and so forth. But what we as an institution are looking at is not only the metrics for Oak Park and River Forest, but our surrounding areas. At this point in time, that we don't feel that we have the ability to bring all of our students on site and our staff in a safe and healthy manner until we meet all of the requirements we have put in place, which means our protocols, the ability to provide adequate social distancing, the ability to provide quality instruction in the most safe and healthy environment that we possibly can. We also, as we noted in our last presentation, have to have the staff also in place to serve our students on site.
What rubrics are you using to prepare for getting students back in school? Please include details on PPE required and safety protocols required.
We recently released last week our health and safety protocol for our students and our staff who enter the building. We have plexiglass, we have that. We're almost with plexiglass in all classrooms. We've ordered plexiglass for student desks, which we don't have at this point in time. We have PPE masks, we have face shields. We have approximately 16,000 plus PPE at this point. We have the signage up for direction in the hallways. We have our protocol on how people enter the building, the temperature checks and so forth that are in place. We are still, so those things are in place. We're still in progress, as I said, with the shields for student desks. We're working out the schedule for lunch. There's still a lot of working parts that are not in place yet, but we are working to get those in place.
Okay, and you said the plan was released. Is there somewhere people can see
No.
that plan?
I said the plan will, the safety protocols, yes, they were sent to all of our parents
Okay,
last week. We sent to all our employees and it can be found on our website. But it's the safety protocols for when entering the building, what would happen if a student would or staff would contract COVID, our process for notifying the health department, the isolation room, and so forth.
why are no pediatricians, virologists, epidemiologists, parents, or students on the remote learning steering committee devising our return to in-person learning plans?
There were no epidemiologists, I'm going to say that, no pediatricians officially on our committee. However, we did seek guidance from a pediatrician from Northwestern, epidemiologist who formerly worked for the CDC, and epidemiologist at Rush. While they were not on the committee, we did seek guidance from them. As we move forward, we will be identifying a pediatrician and a virologist to be a part of the steering committee. But we are also establishing an advisory committee as we move forward that will have various medical professionals. We've had several who have already volunteered that are pediatricians, epidemiologists, virologists, heads of the Northwest, I don't want to say the name wrong, medical centers. We did not have it. Students will be on the advisory committee. There were a few parents on the steering subcommittee, not on the broad steering committee, but on the subcommittee. But moving forward, there will be on the advisory committee.
Under the memorandum of agreement, can the district require teachers to teach in person? The language seems to suggest that only teachers willing to teach will be scheduled to teach in person. Is that true? Is it a matter of public record which teachers are returning?
I'm going to send this question to our Associate Superintendent for Human Resources, Dr. Roxana Sanders.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, that's true. Teachers cannot be required to work in the building according to our remote learning plan for the first semester and according to the memorandum of agreement. However, we do have certain classes that are on site, and schedules were developed voluntarily between the teachers who are willing to work in the building and their supervisors. So those classes are woodworking. We also have auto classes, nursing program would be meeting in the building, and there are some special education classes.
What specifically are the teachers or their union requiring before they are willing to return to at least some in-person teaching?
Dr. Sanders, do you want to take this one? Sheila Harden, who's head of our faculty senate, was supposed to be here, but she's ill, so she is not able to be with us tonight.
Well, the specific requirement is for everybody to be safe. We do have a number of people who indicated that they have underlying medical conditions, or they have somebody they're caring for who has an underlying medical condition, and it is therefore at an increased risk for COVID-19. So we've been working to share safety protocols. It was shared before that we've installed plexiglass, and social distancing and masks are enforced in the building, but still there is this fear that people who are at high risk have, no matter what safety protocols are in place. So we are working on educating our employees, and hopefully as the infection rates go down, if that fear would be overcome.
If I might add, we're also looking into saliva screening.
Yes.
Okay, is there a time frame in which you will have identified the staffing for returning to in-person instruction?
Have Dr. Sanders, can you take that one?
I'm not quite sure of the staffing, whether we would have enough teachers who would be.
Yes, this is just a follow-up question, so it's not one that was on the sheet. I apologize, but yeah. So you're working with teachers now. Is there a time frame that you believe you're targeting to know what you're going to need, and if you're going to need any additional resources to return to in-person teaching?
Well, as soon as the plan for the second semester is finalized and we know what it is, and anybody who has a medical condition that would prevent them from being in the building would submit the application for accommodation. So we expect to have that information prior to the start of the second semester.
Okay. Are you working with and sharing ideas with District 97 and District 90? Will you talk to each other about metrics you are using to determine when it's safe to move to different stages of reopening? Are you sharing information and ideas on ways to make hybrid schedule work effectively?
Dr. Pruitt-Adams?
Okay, so I'll take that one. The first thing we have to realize is that, yes, let me say this. The superintendents in D90 and D97 and I talk. We try to talk every week. Sometimes we don't make it every week, but we talk every other week at least. We touch base. However, we have to realize that there's a difference in elementary and high school structures, as well as middle school structures. We went through that back in our August presentation. And while at the elementary level, when you talk about a hybrid, they can put students in pods in high school with approximately 3,400 different individual schedules that often go across grade ranges. It's difficult to put students in a pod. So I want to say that as it relates to a hybrid. However, we do talk and share. You heard me mention earlier the notion of the advisory committee. I actually had several conversations with the three of us where the superintendent D90 shared with us the concept for the advisory committee, of which we are actually modeling ours after. With regards to metrics, prior to our metrics meeting, we met myself, Ms. Sullivan, the communications person from D97 and superintendent from D97, and talked about the data that we are all looking at as relates to metrics and the positivity rates and what that looks like for each of us as we return to school, so that we are following the same trajectory and the same data paths.
This is regarding other local high schools returning to some hybrid model. That's what I assume. The question doesn't ask that, but that's what I assume. And so it's asking, why are we not following other districts and offering some in-person learning? LT, Glenbart North and South, Downers North, Hinsdale Central, and York are all going back in the next couple weeks. Why isn't OPRF?
Okay, I meet weekly with the superintendents from the West 40 area. We meet every Monday, and we talk about the challenges of remote. We talk about the challenges of hybrid, and we talk about the challenges of in-person. What we realized, as I said earlier, is that each institution is also different. The structure of their building, the age of their building, classroom sizes and so forth, positivity rates vary. We do share plans, and we've looked at some as we begin to develop our hybrid. But to take another school's exact plan and try to put ourselves in that plan would be difficult, to say the least, because of the uniqueness for each institution. But we share, so as we move forward, we've looked at quite a few plans that other districts have brought out to see what pieces of their plans will work for us.
Okay. Can the district please answer the question about using nearby facilities as temporary classrooms for OPRS? For example, Ridgeland Commons, the church across the street, and other options. Are these locations considered in the plan?
So prior to the start of school, we had conversations, and I'm saying we, D97, myself, the Park District, the library, we had conversations about facility usage. And based up on the high school being a little bit different from the elementary districts, we felt that the elementary districts took priority with space usage. The other piece is, as a high school, we felt that we should try our best to bring our students on our campus versus going to someone else's site for reasons of liability, reasons of having staff go somewhere else to deliver those services. And we felt if we were going to be able to deliver them, we needed to find a way to deliver them on site.
Why are there no plans for outdoor classes?
You know, it was said to us earlier about outdoor classes. And I will say, if you count band, we do have instrumental music that's outside, but there were lots of things that we looked at that didn't make us go in that decision. For one, we're in a residential area. We are landlocked with regards to space usage, even outside. For all of our students, we're still talking 3,400 students. Weather conditions, there were various indicators that we felt that that was not a good option for us.
Okay. At the Board of Education meeting, there was a discussion on 40 students returning to in-person instruction. Please detail exactly how many students will receive in-person instruction at OPRF in semester 1. What classes will they be taking, and will they be taught by OPRF teachers?
I'm going to send this one to our Assistant Superintendent, Greg Johnson.
Hi, some of the answer to this question has already been given, and so I just want to reiterate the numbers of classes that we've already identified: woodworking, auto, our learning labs for our special education students, and some others. But right now, as far as numbers are, and additionally those 40 students that have been talked about before, so we identified about 40 students who would benefit from help with connectivity during the day, right, through the internet. And so we have invited those 40 students to come on campus if they would like for support. At this point, because it's going to start next week, we don't know exactly how many students we're going to have on campus, but we're probably looking at somewhere about half that number who say, yes, I want to come in. But of course, that can fluctuate once we realize it. As far as our auto and woodworking classes are concerned, you're talking about 48 students who are on a rotation for those two classes who are coming in and out of the school. We have our learning labs. Shalima Francois Blue might be able to talk a little bit more specifically about that, or Dr. Kennedy Dixon. However, it's my understanding that we have at least starting off today about 16 students who were able to take advantage of that. And that's really where we are at this point. The only other number that I will add to that is a rolling number for behind the wheel. You've heard that referenced a number of times tonight. And that is something that isn't necessarily like, you know, the entire class of kids come in the same way. But we literally have had hundreds of students who have come in throughout the semester to benefit from behind the wheel work with our teachers. And so I think the last part of that question that I make sure I address is about who's doing this work. So it really is a combination of different staff and teachers. So for the courses, woodworking and so on, behind the wheel, those are our OPRF teachers coming in to instruct those courses. But for some of the support classes, the connectivity, right, the space that we have relied on teachers that we have relied on our support staff personnel who can come in to help for a variety of purposes. And so it really is a combination of those two.
So just following up there, Greg. So, but all of those, it's OPRF teachers and it's existing OPRF support staff. I'm wondering if the question is asking, are there other staff being brought in?
I can ask, do you want me to answer that part of that
I
perspective?
do, yeah, go ahead, Shalina.
So the learning labs are actually facilitated by staff that we have identified and brought into the district. They are experienced paraeducators and one is a substitute teacher who have experience working with special populations in therapeutic day school settings as well as public school settings. One of the learning lab facilitators actually is specifically not only working with students in special education that are part of our students that are eligible for our program in TEAM. They are experienced working with students that are low incidence as well as students that are all in high school settings, middle to high school settings.
Okay, and can you tell me what Learning Lab is?
So our learning labs are what we created as an option for creating an alternative pathway for some of our diverse learners to receive for support with accessing remote learning. Not every student is requiring the same level of support. Some are requiring some intensive support with just accessing remote learning. So in each learning lab, we have learning lab facilitators while the students are receiving instruction and services via remote as a modality. But the student is on site. There we have a capacity in each lab per CDC guidelines is of 8 students and 2 adults per lab.
If I may also add, with the Learning Lab, we also have our behavior interventionist on site, Mr. Jason Lee, who is providing social and emotional learning support to students who may need it, who are on site. He checks in with students as well, and he's providing that level of support to students.
And we also have thank you, Dr. Dixon. We also have our transition specialist, Mr. Lee Williams, who's also on site providing support to students that he sees as well for transition services. So it's a combination of staff that have been brought in and hired directly in the district, as well as our own district staff providing support to the programs.
I do want to note, I think it's important to note that while we have someone else coming in for the on-site portion, those instructors and support staff who would normally have those students are working at full caseload. They're working it remotely.
Thank you, Dr. Port-Adams.
Will the building be open for tutoring?
I'll have Dr. Lori Fiorenza, our Director for Student Learning, take that one.
So we are constantly reviewing the data. And as we continue with the rolling hybrid model, the tutoring center is a place that we are looking at providing some opportunity for students to come in. Currently in our A-B schedule, that does make it a little bit difficult for students who might have a second period or an off period study hall when they can access the tutoring center, because getting back and forth in a 30-minute time period can be difficult for some students. So we have taken that into account as we've held off on opening the tutoring center. One of our staff members that is supporting the students with connectivity issues is from the tutoring center. And so that was very intentional. We brought him in and he'll be working with those students that have opted into that service. But then that also creates an opportunity for us to easily roll in other opportunities for students as we look at the data and that decision is made.
Okay. Next question is about the thought exchange survey that went out earlier in the school year. There's some concern that the results of that survey were not used when working to create a plan for this school year. And a question about sending out, why was an additional survey, an identical survey sent out without implementing the changes from the first survey?
I'm gonna have Associate, I had your title wrong, Greg, sorry. Associate Superintendent Greg Johnson take this one.
Yeah, that's quite all right.
Yeah, I know you were fretting.
So we communicated that we would do 2 thought exchange surveys right off the bat when we brought our plan to the board in August. The first was really geared more towards students' sense of connection to the school, and we wanted to get feedback on that. And while the other was for, the second one was for parents, teachers, and students to talk more about how the whole remote learning plan is going. There's no doubt that the themes from those 2 thought exchanges overlapped to some extent, with themes about the utility of our advisory period and about how the homework load is going, as well as themes about how the A-B schedule really works for all of our students. And so they really were designed purposefully to serve kind of 2 different ends, but what we found is that the feedback overlapped. And so I want to remind everybody that while it seems, and goodness it does seem, that we have been in this remote learning plan this semester for quite some time, we are talking about 6 weeks. And the packaging up of the feedback from the last thought exchange survey really just happened not too long ago. And we are using that feedback for our internal conversations with our steering committee, with our division heads. I had a conversation today about advisories and how we can shift that even this semester to help make that more productive and valuable for all of our students. And so I understand, and I hear loud and clear that you have not seen these really clear outside signals that this shifted from A to B as a result of that data. But that doesn't mean that we aren't analyzing that data and talking about it within our committees to see how we can improve moving forward. And I want to draw everybody's attention to the shifts that we did make, the significant shifts that we did make between the spring experience and the fall experience that are based off of the feedback that we got from our community. So I understand it's not fast enough, but by no means does that mean that we aren't looking at and trying to find ways to shift our approach to better meet the needs of all of our kids.
Will there be a parent survey, not thought exchange, on return to school preferences, including remote hybrid preferences? If so, when?
We honestly have not talked about that, a parent survey outside of thought exchange. However, as Mr. Johnson indicated, we are hearing feedback that parents want a different type of survey. You also heard me speak earlier about the establishment of an advisory committee. And it is our hope that the advisory committee will help us as we move forward with recommendations for hybrid or in-person, and help us look at the different variables that will need to be addressed to provide quality instructional programming and social emotional support. Parents will have an opportunity to opt in or opt out, but at this point, there has not been a discussion about having parents make that formal decision for us. That's not to say we won't do a survey. We just have not discussed one outside the thought exchange at this time.
And I would add that it's early to be making decisions about second semester. We are just now in October at the beginning of flu season. We don't know what's going to happen with the numbers. So we don't want to take people's opt-in information now when it could really change in, say, the next 6 weeks. But we will be asking for that information at some point.
The other thing about preference too is we have to keep in mind that when we return, we have to return with being able to ensure to the best of our ability the health and safety of our students and our staff. And that can't be just built up on the percentage of people who want to return versus the percentage of people who don't.
Will there be an option for fully remote learning next semester or whenever in-person learning resumes? Well, Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say that is our hope. We said that in our presentation. What we realized, even with the students we've brought back on campus thus far, that we've had some parents who've opted out. They have want to make sure that all the protocols are in place, that we can ensure the safe and healthy environment for their children. And so, yes, parents will have an option. That's our hope. That's our goal.
Will those students, if students choose to remain remote, will they be able to continue with the same block schedule and teachers that have been working so well for them?
I can't answer that. That would have to be deferred to the teaching and learning group that's currently working on the schedule.
Yeah, and the only thing I can say is it's a great question. It's an incredibly important question. But again, we don't know the answer to it at this point, right? Because we haven't developed that model for second semester. That's just where we are with it.
How will the school manage continuity of learning with students in different programs / location? Where I'm assuming this means remote versus in-person.
Yeah, I interpret this question, and if I'm getting this wrong, either a follow-up question from whoever put this in, or you can email me and I'll respond to. I interpret this question as how do you handle the simultaneous learning, right? So I'm going to have kids synchronously, or I'm going to have kids in the building right now that I'm teaching. I'm also at the exact same time to have some of those exact same students at home. And that's definitely a challenge. In some ways, really what that amounts to is two different types of preps for the learning experiences for those kids. And so I know that around this area, other parts throughout the state, schools have begun to tackle this in different ways. Everywhere from using like a swivel, which is a camera that you have in the classroom that simply records everything that's going on in that class for anybody who's at home, using Chromebooks or other type of laptop device, the camera within that for something somewhat similar, if more stationary. Or planning separately entirely for the idea that there's something going on internally here and there's something completely asynchronously that's going on for families at home. But when we get to a point where we're able to scale up this hybrid model more holistically for a much larger percentage of our students, that certainly is a prominent question we have to tackle. But we don't have that done. But we've had several conversations about how that looks, and we've gathered a lot of information and feedback from other high schools about how they have been able to approach that as well.
How are students and their parents being held accountable as far as safety during COVID? We all know having teens during COVID is not easy. But if any in-person learning occurs and families allow large social gatherings and parties, is there a way those students can be excused from all in-person activities, including sports? This honestly is more directed at the parents than the students, because as the adults in this situation, we must come together and have uniform expectations for outside the school and uniform consequences for those not in compliance with IDPH safety standards.
Thank you. So we will continue as a district. We're committed to constantly referring our students and our parents back to promoting wearing of masks, frequent hand washing, social distancing, in our ongoing communications. With regards to what we do if a student tests positive, our protocol, which is on our website, and that I indicated that we sent out last week, says that students will be removed from school for isolation. When we've had incidences this summer and at the early start of the school year with sports practices, we've notified those parents. And we've had those students who were in proximity quarantined. The other thing is we meet weekly, all of the surrounding Oak Park school districts with the Oak Park Department of Public Health. And we all maintain what's called a line list. And that line list indicates students and/or staff members who have been identified as testing positive for COVID, and it is shared with the Oak Park Department of Public Health. If they get the information, they share it with us, but it allows us to watch our numbers. It allows us to contact those parents, but it also allows the Oak Park Department of Public Health to do contact tracing. Our job is to continuously, as I said, in our communications, encourage our parents and our students. If we really want to come back in person, we have to abide by the CDC guidelines and the guidelines from the Illinois Department of Public Health.
Okay, I'm going to switch sections, Karen. I'm going to go to question 70. Let me know when you're ready.
Yep, ready.
My students have had many teachers swearing during their remote classes. How is this being addressed?
I'll send that one to Dr. Fiorenza.
Thank you. So I am not aware of that occurring. I think the best thing for a parent to do if there's a concern about anything that happens during their child's remote learning experience is to reach out to the division head or the teacher and communicate with those individuals to resolve the matter.
What are the results of the teacher collaboration?
Lori?
So I apologize, but I'm not really clear as to what that question is asking. So as Mr. Johnson indicated, if I don't provide a very clear answer, please feel free to email me and I'll clarify further. But teacher collaboration time really is a time for our teachers to plan and prep. So I'm not sure what results the person that asked the question is looking for, but I'm happy to have further conversation and answer that better.
Okay. With the abbreviated teaching time each week, why aren't some teachers taking advantage of the time they have? Many classes do not last for the entire hour. Some classes are only 20 minutes. How can you encourage teachers to increase synchronous minutes?
So contained within our plan is an expectation that all teachers teach 120 minutes synchronously per week. So that means that a teacher does have flexibility as to how they manage to get to that 120. So I may do 20 minutes one day and another A day do 100 minutes. So as long as the teacher reaches the goal of 120 minutes, which does put us within the guidelines as outlined by the state, then they do have that flexibility. Again, if there are specific questions or concerns about the amount of time or lack thereof, those questions should be really directed to the division head of that specific course, and the division head would be happy to help navigate conversation.
My child has informed me that they are aware that other students are cheating during tests, texting and connecting otherwise to share information. If teachers can't figure out how to make the playing field level for students, what are you going to do about this inequity?
So most importantly, if you have specific concerns about cheating, please reach out to your students' teachers directly. We have and we will continue to take this seriously, even of course when we're in remote learning and in a pandemic. I know that our teachers have investigated and implemented different programs and have taken some pretty creative steps to help with cheating in our current situation, but of course nothing is ever 100% effective. The position that's being referred to here for the Director of Equity, it was designed to primarily address racial equity, helping us to address systemic and historic inequities and challenging the ways that white supremacy culture exists here at OPRF. While there is certainly overlap between the question and the concern that's being brought up in this question and the goals of that specific position, as there would be with any part of the organization here at OPRF. He really isn't the person, right, who would challenge and approach issues of academic dishonesty. For an individual response to such issues, as Dr. Fiorenza mentioned before, you can talk to division heads. The teacher, of course, directly would be your primary source. And of course, you could go to Dr. Fiorenza as well, and you know, wherever you want to go. But I will say that lumping those two together is really conflating two different things in the school.
I've noticed many times that students are keeping their cameras off. Is there any way we can make this mandatory? I have a feeling it's difficult for teachers to teach without seeing kids.
Yeah, this was actually some of the feedback that we received when we did a little bit of remote learning, well, quite a bit of remote learning during our summer school. Our teachers provided exactly that information. And so if you go to our remote learning plan right now, it is actually an expectation that we do want our students to be on camera, to be visible throughout the class periods. Of course, this is a challenge for our teachers. You know, when you're teaching a full class of students, 20, 25 plus students, and somebody's not on their camera, you have a few different questions here, right? If you're in person, you can walk around, kind of, you know, tap that student, get that student engaged. Remote, how exactly do you stop that lesson? Is it worth it, stopping the entire lesson and the instruction for everybody for that one student? So I think we need to recognize how that exists in a remote world versus the types of way to kind of re-engage students in-person experiences. Yeah, we do want our students to be on camera if at all possible. And of course, we recognize and understand that technology issues and even personal issues could come in to make that impossible for some students. And we have to be flexible and understanding of that too. But we start with the expectation that we do want that. So if that's something that you think is impeding some sort of experience for your students, some learning experience for your student in classes, again, please reach out to the teacher, or you can certainly talk with us about it as well.
At the last town hall, it was stated that the teachers would be giving an assessment to each student to see where the student was starting at for the school year. Did this happen? What data did the administration learn from these assessments? How can parents see the assessment for their child?
Okay, so a few things on this one. First, a variety of individual assessments, formative assessments at the very beginning of semester certainly were administered by our teachers to understand where their students were. Something that is just a part of really good teaching, right? You want to understand where your students are so that you don't necessarily start the year exactly where you might have otherwise planned. Our teachers are really solid at this, and there was a lot of that going on at the beginning of the year. That is local classroom-specific assessment, okay? We did, however, give a STAR reading and math assessment to gauge level of learning and learning loss for our students at the beginning of the year. This is our normal universal screener. We gave that to every single freshman and sophomore. And that purpose, like I said, was to assess learning loss. And we have begun to analyze that data. We actually just received the final data on that assessment for our sophomores this last Friday. And so I had a meeting with our coordinator of learning analytics today to give me an overview of how she's analyzing that data and a very preliminary look at where we're at. If parents are interested in these STAR results, I think that was the last part of that question, please contact your student's English or math teacher. This data is used for the purpose of informing work with students in the classroom. And so please reach out to the teacher and they can share that with you as well. Let me see if there's anything else I want to point out on that. Yeah, I think that covers it. Thanks.
Traditional grading seems unreasonable during COVID. Can we do pass-fail this year?
No, we will not be doing pass-fail this school year. It's imperative that we stick with grades. This was some of the very clear feedback that we got from our experience, both as we were going through the late spring work of remote learning last school year, and as we plan for this school year. And it's also really important just for the integrity of the grade and for the integrity and consistency of the transcripts as students prepare for their post-secondary lives, that we hold on to those grades. So we will be sticking with letter grades.
What is the school doing to make sure that students are receiving feedback about their learning? Assignments and assessments are taking an inordinate amount of time to be graded and posted. There just seems to be an overall lag in the grading process, therefore leading to uncertainty of grades of students.
Lori?
Sorry, almost forgot to unmute. So I think the person who asked the question is correct. It is taking an inordinate amount of time to provide grades, but feedback is a little bit different. So feedback isn't necessarily the grade. Feedback can be communicating with a student through Go Formative on how they did on a particular piece, providing some kind of, even through the Zoom lesson, some kind of verbal feedback for students to know, are they mastering the skill? Is there something they still need to refresh on? I know that teachers, when we're in person, really walk around the classroom and can provide that feedback. However, now they've had to be incredibly creative and use some new tools and techniques and technological techniques to get feedback to students. So for example, in a math class, teachers are, instead of just asking students to write out an answer, they're asking students to explain an answer, either verbally or written, or through an auditory technique. Dr. Fry could elaborate a little bit more about how her teachers are doing that. But giving feedback from that experience is going to take longer. Grading that experience is going to take longer. And I think I'll let Dr. Fry kind of explain why that's taking longer.
Thank you, Dr. Fiorenza. So since we're not looking at the kids and being able to assess how they're doing immediately, we're trying to still figure out what the kid is thinking. And so because we're not in a classroom having that amazing interaction with them to see what it is they're thinking, we're having them write things down, speak things into a microphone that we then listen to. How do you know this is true? Why do you know this is true? This also, by the way, will go to help eliminate some of the cheating, because it's hard to cheat on those kinds of questions. So when we go through and we listen and read these, then we are giving like individual feedback, either through, again, speaking into a speaker or writing it out. So for a typical teacher that maybe teaches 3 sections of a regular course class, it's 125 kids and multiple responses for kids that they're reading, giving feedback on, reading and giving feedback on. It's just more time consuming than if you were in the class and you could look at the paper, point to it and say, hey, think about this, what about this? It just takes, it's a longer process.
And I would just finalize our response to this in that as we're continuing to learn how to do virtual school, whether it's 100% remote, whether it's hybrid, we are in the process of learning. And so our teachers are about to experience or have the opportunity to take advantage of some professional learning opportunities relative to how to give formative feedback virtually. So we are working on that. And again, as with everything, if there are concerns about really what your student has mastered, what your student still is struggling with, the best place is just to reach out to the teacher, and the teacher can provide that feedback as well.
There are varying feelings on the amount of homework, the amount of instruction. I'm going to read 4 questions, but I think they can be answered together. Teachers are handing out way too much homework. Kids are already super stressed with everything, and online school is very draining. Is there any way teachers cannot give as much homework outside of class? It's difficult to keep up. Why is there so little instruction in homework? Please increase the academic rigor. There is less class time, there's less learning time with the AB schedule. Why is there not more homework to fill the remainder of the normal school day? It seems like academic standards have plunged and the content is watered down with more emphasis on social time. Is this an administrative initiative? If so, why?
Greg, you want to, or well, Lori, either one of you.
So I'm happy to answer the questions relative to the amount of homework. And I think as the questions, 3 of them asked, they all had a different perspective. And so really defining what is enough is really very difficult, and it varies from person to person, student to student. So teachers are really doing the very best they can to think holistically about the students in front of them and make decisions about issuing homework that will allow students an opportunity to practice the things that they've been working on in class, practice those skills, because that really is what homework is for. It's to get that repetition. I think as teachers continue to get better at remotely differentiating, that you may see some influx in opportunities from student to student. I think the last question I'll let Mr. Johnson answer. I think you were going to.
Ms. Johnson, could you help me with the last part of that question? Was that the school initiative question?
Yes, it was the
Yeah.
feeling that academic standards have plunged and
Right.
there's an emphasis on social time. Yes.
So the feedback that we've seen from our STAR assessments for freshmen and sophomores suggests that student growth from freshman to sophomore year last year is on par. Our first analysis, right? It is on par with what we have seen in the past. That's the first thing I want to throw out there. The second thing I want to say is that no, of course it's not an initiative to lower expectations in the school. In fact, it's one of our most prominent curricular initiatives to do the exact opposite for all of our students in that school. And so we do, however, recognize that all learning is social. That is how we learn. We learn in conjunction with others. And I understand the frustration. I understand how hard it is. And I also understand for those of you who are really frustrated that your students aren't experiencing that type of social interaction or in-house rigor that you would want to see. That falls on, that sounds hollow, all right? It doesn't sound like that we are sincere, but we are. Well, of course we want our kids back in the school. Of course we want learning to go on as it has within in-person classrooms in this school. We know that remote learning is not exactly what in-person learning is, and there are shortcomings to a remote learning plan, which is why at the very beginning of the presentation, Dr. Pruitt-Adams said, you know, we started off our semester saying to the community, look, first semester, we're going to be remote. But we have merged that into this rolling hybrid plan where we are looking to bring more and more kids into the school as part of that hybrid experience. And we will still continue to have an eye on doing that because we know how valuable it is for learning to get students out of kind of the seclusion of their screen at homes. I know it personally as a father that is going on right now. So the comments aren't lost. We're doing the best we can with the judgment that we have around us to be able to move forward with the plan that we have right now. So I just wanted to throw that out there. We understand the challenges and we are doing our best to move forward with what we can.
The time check, we have about 5 more minutes before we take the questions that have been submitted during the town hall. So I think we probably have time for one more question and then we'll move to the live questions.
Please provide racial, low income, and gender breakdown of attendance so far in remote learning this school year. Please show a trend line by week. Are students starting to drop in attendance?
Greg, you want to take this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So give me 1 second.
Question 104.
Yeah, thank you so much. So to monitor our students' rates of attendance, our attendance team uses the framework for Attendance Works, which is a research-based approach to evaluate attendance patterns and to provide strategies to reduce chronic absenteeism. This is something that we have been doing, right, for a while at the high school, and we're certainly doing it here. As part of our early warning system, this data is run after the first 20 days of the school, which has been shown to be predictive of future attendance patterns. The data is then reviewed at the school level to evaluate the school as a whole. It's disaggregated by race, gender, disability status, free and reduced lunch status, and English language learners. Our attendance team then provides student level data to their corresponding PSS teams. And if indicated, special education team is needed. For further review, as well as a trigger for potential needed intervention, I also want to share out that we take that data and we tier it into 4 different response categories. Those students who are satisfactory, those students, and these are students who are attending 95 or more percent of the time. Those students who are minimally at risk, right? These are students who are at least 90% of the time. And then those students who are moderate chronic absences, which is 10 to 20% out of the school, and then severe chronic absences, which is 20% or more. And what we have seen with our data so far is pretty interesting. First, we have seen that overall, 89% of our school population is attending at least in those first 2 categories, 90% or above. We also do see that the racial disparities with our attendance data is what we see during the regular school year. They still exist. It is an important challenge for us at OPF, as everybody knows, and that persists right now. And so we are going through our interventions with those ideas in mind. I also do want to say though that overall our attendance right now is better than it is during a regular school year. And so it's not like, you know, incredibly better, but the attendance rate in the data that we see right now suggests it is better than it is during the regular school year. What does this tell us? This tells us that there are likely other indicators that we need to be looking at to figure out the level of engagement for our students, taking a look at grade rate data, taking a look at those STAR assessments that I mentioned before as 2 incredibly important indicators to help us understand true levels of engagement for our students. This question asks for a variety of specific data in graphs and so on. And so what I provided here is an overview of that data. But what we absolutely are doing is tracking this data and using it internally on a regular basis. And we are using this data to help inform the revisions and changes to our plan as our steering committee moves towards the rolling hybrid and our plans for second semester.
Karen, can I ask one more question?
Please.
Is there, okay, where am I at? Okay, how are you monitoring the quality of remote teaching?
Yeah.
Please commit to share your data and conclusions reached with the community. What changes have you made and will you make based on this data?
Yeah, so this really is, thanks for asking that, because that's kind of very much related to that last question. And so the data that we are relying on right now is the reading and math universal screeners that we have, of course, grade rate distributions for our students, and the attendance data. We just had our first official progress period where grades are kind of, you know, made a little bit more final, right, than they are during a regular come and go of a week, right? Teachers make an effort to get those assessment grades in so that the grades have a little bit more consistent validity across the school. And so we're using that data to figure out how we're going to respond moving forward. And right now, again, we are in the initial stages of analyzing that data and figuring out how we're going to move forward. And what we do see is that we have some challenges in front of us as far as student engagement is concerned, as far as this grade data goes. But again, you will see that reflected in the plans that we develop as we move through this semester and as we go into second semester. It's analyzing that data as it comes in to purposely make changes into our plan and to figure out who we can intervene. I also don't want to make it sound like we are only doing this for, just as I was talking about with the attendance data. Again, of course, we're analyzing this data for the purpose of the long haul and changes to our plan. We're also analyzing that data to figure out how we can intervene and better support our students right now with their remote experiences. So, thank
Okay.
you.
I'd like to acknowledge that there are a lot of questions that did not get answered, and we should discuss how to get those answers to the community.
Well, our plan is to take the questions that were submitted and add them to the FAQ, which is currently on our website.
Did you want to move to the live questions, Sherry?
Yes, I'll move to the live questions now. Please define rolling hybrid. This is new and confusing.
Dr. Pruitt-Adams, I think this is your phrase.
So if you saw our first plan, we talked about phase 1 of OPRF phase 2. And so our hope is to begin to gradually, even more so than we have already, in January. I think school starts back January the 12th. You heard us say we want to have a plan presented to the board by December 3rd. In that, it will have a progression based up on different levels as it relates to the Reopen Illinois plan and our stage of reopening, where we'll have a percentage of students and teachers on site and continue to move forward until we are at a point in the second semester where every student will have some opportunity, should they opt in, to in-person instruction on site. And what that looks like, we don't know at this point, but it's a gradual progression. Say, for example, if we started at 10%, then 20%, then 30%, working our way towards, hopefully at some point, as I said, all of our students having some in-person experience.
There are a couple questions regarding teachers, the union, etc. When will you begin to negotiate with the teachers to have them return to in-person learning? The real part of this question is, I feel that teachers' demands are put in front of student needs.
Dr. Sanders, you want to take this one?
Well, if we return to in-person instruction, that is just return to normal, so that does not need to be negotiated.
I think this question though is asking about the hybrid model, is my impression.
Right.
When will we begin negotiations regarding semester 2? The agreement we have now, just so everyone's clear, just applies to semester 1.
And if I can also clarify, I think it's getting to the feeling that the teachers can determine if they come back to school. And I'm not saying that's wrong, I'm saying, but that's what the question is asking. And there's some concern that that's in front of the need of the students. And so if you could respond to that.
So once again, the return to teaching in the building does not have to be negotiated. If there are any changes to working conditions in the building, if the time schedule will be different in the hybrid plan, then we would have to negotiate it. But the plan has not been finalized yet. So once we know what the plan is, then we will start talking to the teachers union.
Our goal, though, I will add, is that when we make our presentation to the board at the December 3rd board meeting, our plan is to hopefully have negotiations completed.
Classes this fall are materially better than those in the spring. It doesn't seem like the level and the depth of content in the classes are consistent in prior years. Do you have any data yet as to what percentage of content is planned to be covered this semester compared to last year? How will this work for AP exams?
Greg?
Yes, got it. Thanks. You know what? I'll hazard an answer to this really quickly, and then Julie, if you want to chime in too, at least from a math perspective, that would be great. As far as coverage of content, what our teachers have done is they've taken a look at the scope of their curriculum and they've determined those things that are absolutely most essential to cover what's critical, right? Our critical standards that we have, and they are covering those as we move through the semester. This does mean that in our AP classes, we are prepping our kids for those AP exams as they exist in their full scope. And so if your kid is taking an AP test, you will find that the level of rigor and the pace of that class is challenging in a remote environment, as it should be, right? It's a college level class at the high school. And we don't want to shy away from that rigor. We want to be supportive and helpful, but we do want to hold on to that rigor for those AP classes. Julie, do you want to add anything there?
No, that's exactly what I would say. I will tell you that in the math curriculum, we're not cutting anything out. The only things that we would be omitting would be concepts we consider to be superfluous, or things that are sort of added in to enhance the curriculum, but not required as essential learning goals. And AP, nothing has been pared down from College Board. So AP teachers are teaching the full curriculum. It may feel like less curriculum because of the sort of block scheduling, but it's not in actuality less curriculum, is what I would say.
And I would just echo that while Dr. Fry is speaking from the math division, that in conversations with each one of the division heads, this is the same response from each one of them. So Dr. Fry's response is applicable across all of the divisions.
What if it becomes evident that a vaccine won't be available for more than a year? What time frame is acceptable?
Again, our goal is to have a hybrid at the start of second semester. We will be following the stage 5 of Restore Illinois is vaccine or some available treatment. That may be, as we've heard, the end of 2021. Our goal is to have a hybrid plan and move forward with getting our students in the building based upon the positivity numbers for the state of Illinois, Cook County, Oak Park and River Forest, and our surrounding area.
So just to clarify, Sherry, so it seems to me that question was asking when will we be 100% back in the building? Is that how you're interpreting that?
The way I'm interpreting that is we may not have a vaccine for a long time. So how long is it acceptable to keep our kids out of school? Like what risk are we mitigating here? Where do the students become the priority? That's how I'm taking that.
And I would say our students have always been our priority. One of the reasons we went remote is because their safety and health are a priority for us. When we look at our current numbers and based upon what our architects have shown us, you know, in a perfect world, we'd love to have 100% of our students in our building. But at this point in time, we can't keep them safe. And if we can't keep them safe and healthy, then their best interest is not at our heart. And that's not where we are. But our numbers suggest that 25 to 30% right now is about what we can manage on a given day. And so that's why I stress that for second semester, it's giving every student who opts in an opportunity to have some in-person instruction. That does not mean that that would be in-person instruction 5 days a week. But our goal is to have them in the building. Right now, to even say 50% of our students in the building would be pushing it in terms of health and safety.
We can't maintain the social distancing in our classrooms with 50% of the kids in the building. So we have about 5 more minutes. You want to add definitely one more question, maybe 2, Sherry?
Yes. What condition is the ventilation system in? Are there any efforts being made to make sure that the air circulation meets standards for returning to school?
I'm going to have Ron Anderson, our Executive Director of Operations, take that one. We can't hear you, Ron. Check your keyboard. You may have muted yourself on your keyboard. No. No. Let's take another question.
What is the process for evaluating getting the seniors and freshmen back into the classroom? As you contemplate your plan for second semester, the seniors and then the freshmen should be the priority here. These seniors and freshmen need to be allowed to come back first.
Greg, you want to take that one?
Sure. I understand that our freshmen and our seniors definitely have unique needs, right? Freshmen transitioning to a campus, seniors in their culminating capstone year at the high school. I would also throw in there that we have a large number of sophomores and juniors who also have needs, learning needs, that would put them in the top of a list to get into the school as quickly as we can for their learning. So to universally say freshmen and seniors, that's what our priority should be as a school. I'm not sure if we're there. I haven't seen those conversations throughout the state in other high schools, nor do I see that reflected in the state guidance that we have for remote and hybrid learning. What we see there is a focus, as you see here, on kind of this specialized programs for our students to most support them. With that said, I know, of course, our freshmen and our seniors it's challenging. But as we move towards with our remote, our rolling plan, as we've talked about, we will continue to try to find ways to get more and more students in the school.
And it seems worth mentioning too that a lot of our classes have a mixture of grade levels. So you might have freshmen and sophomores in a class together. You could have sophomore, junior, senior. So it's a little hard to make those segments in the way, say, elementary schools do with their pods of kids.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a very fair point.
Yeah, I think we have time for one more question, Sherry.
Are we able to get the ventilation question answered now?
No, Ron.
If he's not on, I will tell you that the architects have particularly told us with the new section of the building, and Ron, you can nod your head if I'm on track here. With the new section of the building, they have increased the ventilation that they're putting in to the construction. He's talking, am I correct, Ron? And then the other thing that Ron has told us about is the switching out of filters. There's a different caliber of filter that will be used in our classrooms where we have some issues. The other thing, there are some rooms where the air circulates into each room, and he's even talked about putting in a vent so that there's a pull in and the disbursement of air. I hope I got all that right. I think he's trying to call in or writing me a note or something. I can't read the
We
note.
can't see. You're disappearing into your background, Ron. We'll answer this more thoroughly in the FAQ. You know, as Sherry mentioned, Dr. Chandler mentioned, there are a couple of hundred questions. We'll get up.
Oh, that's the filter. It's called the MERV 13 filters that we're putting in. And they are also looking at our air handlers and how we replace our air handlers moving forward. I think that's the right term. Yeah, I listen.
And we are at 8 o'clock. So thank you everyone for tuning in. Thank you to the steering committee. Thank you to our E-team and Dr. Chandler for helping us out with the question selection. Again, we'll be following up in the next week or so, answering more questions and adding to our FAQ. Last time I sent an email letting you know that we had updated it, and we'll do that again so that you know when that's posted. So thanks, everyone. We really appreciate your participation. Have a good night.
Thank you.